A quick message before the video starts. You may be interested in a few books I've written. These are dark comedies about murder, love, society, and sex. For more details and to download the books, visit the website. Hello everybody and welcome to this video, which is at last my Q&A video, something that I promised to do months ago but just never found the time to do it. And this video is to mark my 10 years of living in Morocco. I asked you guys to send me your questions about my experience, and I'm going to give you absolutely honest answers. I promise you that. Some of the answers you might not like, but you are more than welcome to leave your comments and your thoughts in the comment section below this video. So let's get straight into it. First question comes from Jad, who is actually an ex-student of mine. And he says, how much would you rate your 10 years living here out of 20 and why? If this is about me having to compare the last 10 years in Morocco with an imaginary 10 years in the United Kingdom, absolutely Morocco gets 20 out of 20. I'm actually quite surprised and scared about what is happening in the UK, the way that it is just deteriorating rapidly. And compare that with the lifestyle that I have here in Morocco. I'm very wealthy in comparison to what I would be if I lived in the UK. I have great social value here. The fact that I can speak English quite well is a great asset to Moroccans. And as a result, I have greater access to some of the higher levels of public figures here in Morocco, something I would never have in the United Kingdom. So I have a greater sense of social mobility, which would be impossible for me in the UK. And on top of that, there's always the things that everybody talks about, which is the food. Food is very cheap here, it's very fresh, and the weather, of course, and the people. Moroccans are great people. And his second question is, what cultural shocks have you had? The cultural shock is not really about the country that you go to, but the country that you've left. And for me, every time I go back to the UK, I notice something more shocking. How fat everybody is. I've mentioned this in other videos, and it really disturbs me when I think about how many fat people I see in the United Kingdom, and also how many mobility scooters are being used in the United Kingdom. You see them all over the place, and it is because people are unhealthy. And the other cultural shock that I have every time I go to the UK is realizing how much the British people need alcohol in order to enjoy themselves. Alcohol is such a fundamental part of UK culture and UK society, and that's really quite obvious almost immediately, but it's not until you dig a bit deeper that you realize why that is the case. And it's because British people are really unhappy. Okay, next question from Saga 64. Did you have any difficulties as someone who doesn't speak Arabic or Darija, especially when getting a job as a teacher? If yes, how did you get through? Actually, the answer is no. I've had very little difficulty. In fact, very little to the point of almost none at all. And I would say in terms of getting a job as a teacher, being a native speaker is actually an asset. A school or an organization will try to find a way of getting around the problems of you not speaking the native language, rather than say you don't speak Darija, you don't speak Arabic, you don't speak French, so we can't employ you. They just don't do that. The other thing I would say is that when you go into schools, I'm very honest with my students, and I tell them from day one that I don't speak Arabic and I don't speak French. And the initial reaction that I get from the kids is often the kind of, whoa. But they very quickly adapt to it, and it actually becomes a benefit to them in their learning because they have to speak English, and just that the whole mindset is focused on English when they speak to me. The other thing I would say is that you obviously pick up words, phrases, so that obviously helps. You find people who speak your language, and so, that helps. So the longer you stay in a country, the easier it actually gets. But in terms of employment, being a native speaker who does not speak Arabic, French, it's been far from a problem. Not a problem at all. Okay, next question from Mamoon, also an ex-student of mine. What were the hardest things to adapt to? For me, the biggest difficulty I guess I've had is trying to adapt to the idea that I'm not as free to speak my mind as I would be if I were in the United Kingdom. So, and maybe there is a level of paranoia to that. Maybe I'm just being a bit overcautious, but I do get the feeling that I need to be more aware of what I say and how I say it. I've had a few ideas for videos, for example, that I've shown to friends or I've discussed with my Moroccan friends, and they've said, well, maybe you shouldn't do that, or, find a different way of saying that. On the whole, it's actually not very difficult, really. It's something you have to be aware of, and I wouldn't have had to be aware of if I lived in the UK. I'll give you some examples of some videos that I have done that people have said to me, maybe you need to be a bit careful about this, but I've gone ahead and done it anyway. Perhaps the biggest one was the video that I did where I swapped the image of the King of Morocco on the currency with the Queen of the United Kingdom on the currency of the pound. A lot of people said to me, that's very dangerous. It's the image of the king. You need to be careful. But I thought, I'm not being insulting to the king, and it's, artistic interpretation. And that video has had well over 100,000 views, and I've had no problem with it. Another video that I felt I had to be careful about, and people advised me actually not to do, was a video where I examined the difference between religious education and sex education in Morocco and in the United Kingdom. So sometimes I think it's a balance between being daring and just doing it, and also the other side being a little bit more respectful and careful. And it's a balance, and sometimes it's difficult, but you have to think about that, and perhaps you wouldn't have to do that in the United Kingdom. Kauta asks me, what are the things you like in Morocco and in the people also? Okay, so for me, the big thing about Morocco, why I am here, is that Morocco feels to me like Spain in the mid-1980s to the mid-1990s. So in Spain, they had a dictator who died in the mid-70s. And by the time we get to the mid-80s, you get a generation of young people who literally never experienced life under the dictatorship. And that was the first generation to explore creativities and freedoms and to be a bit more daring. And I think that's what's happening here in Morocco. Young people are starting to do things that previous generations would think to be impossible or not acceptable. And I think this has been driven by the fact that younger people are exposed a lot more to Western culture, social media, but also Netflix, music. They are experiencing a much more liberal, open-minded culture. Being right in the middle of a change in attitude is something really fascinating to me. The way that the older generations and the younger generations are thinking and acting. The other thing I love about being in Morocco is the fact that there is very, few CCTV cameras here. You can walk for hours and hours and never be recorded on CCTV. That is an impossibility in the United Kingdom. Most places in the United Kingdom, there are just CCTV everywhere. And it's not just one, it's like 3 or 4 different cameras down the street. Some of them are owned by the government, some of them are owned by local businesses. It's like you are constantly on camera. And I find that something very uncomfortable. Here in Morocco, not a problem. And of course, the other thing is here in Morocco, cash is still king. People still pay things with money, and that makes it a lot more difficult for the government, for businesses to track you. I get laughed at by Moroccans for saying this, but Moroccans have a level of freedom that people in the United Kingdom lost years ago. It is a level of freedom that you don't appreciate that you have until you lose it. And then when you lose it, you can't get it back. Okay, soup those 7. What aspects of Moroccan culture have you grown to dislike over the years? Don't worry about offending anyone. People who watch my videos probably know that I love dogs. And I do have a problem with the general Moroccan opinion of dogs. I don't think Moroccans yet really appreciate how fantastic dogs are to humans. Dogs are the bridge. They are the connector between the human world and the animal world. And dogs can do so much for human beings. And Morocco's just not really beginning to understand that. For example, guide dogs. Like Morocco has no guide dogs. All the blind people in Morocco, they just use sticks. And in the United Kingdom, all over the world, in fact, that we have dogs that help people get across the road. And we have dogs help people in emergency situations. People have dogs that will actually go and get the medicine for you, open the fridge, get you some water, if you've collapsed, or in fact, not even that, if you are about to collapse, because dogs can smell human illness and they can react to a human well before the human being even knows there's something wrong with them. Dogs are fantastic, and I would really love to see Morocco develop a good relationship with dogs, because it will help Moroccan society greatly. Second thing, dropping litter in the street. I think this is something that all expats complain about. Okay, here's the thing. I don't believe you love or respect your country if you drop rubbish in the street. I've said it. Another thing that I find very strange and something that makes me feel quite uncomfortable is adults who wear safety helmets on motorbikes, but they don't put a helmet on their kid. And you see them, like these little kids going, 60, 70 kilometers down the road. And their dad has a helmet. So if they crash, the dad's going to be fine. The little kid's going to be dead, but the dad's going to be kind. They're going to be fine. And I don't know what message that sends to me is you value your own life more than you do the value of your child. And I'm sure that it's not. I'm obviously looking at this from a Western point of view, but it does seem very strange to me that you would protect yourself before you would protect your child and actually put your child in danger. Okay, everybody, this video has turned out to be a lot longer than I expected it to be, so I've decided to cut it into 2 halves, and what you have just watched is the first part. Don't forget to leave any comments or ideas or your thoughts in the comment section below, particularly if you found something in the video that you didn't agree with. Hopefully you will join me again for part 2, which should be on your screens now. And if it is not, then it's because it hasn't been edited and uploaded yet. Thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to buy my books. See you in the next one. Bye-bye now.